and gentlemen, the American Jury and Bulldog Nation, today you're going to get a little history lesson to explain the significance of this election battle. And I will go as far to say that Western civilization itself actually might be at stake. Theodore Roosevelt, while running for president the third time, or actually the second time that he actually ran as a member of the Bull Moose Party, famously said, and this is a great speech, he said, "We stand at Armageddon and we battle for the Lord." How do you like that? And you know what? Throughout history, over and over again, there's been moments on the world stage in American history where if people didn't sacrifice themselves, we would have disaster. And you've heard me say this over and over again. Politicians today, they won't even sacrifice their office for doing what's right, much less their lives. But I'm going to take you through a little history tour. Let's begin at Thermopylae and Leonidas. Do you believe that Leonidas, who was the king of Sparta, fought with 300 Spartans, sent the rest of them home, and he battled Xerxes and the Persians just to give the Greeks 3 more days? They laid down their lives. That's what they did. That's the truth. Then you had in 620 AD, Charles Martel, famously known as the Hammer, stopped the Muslims at Tours in modern-day France. It's generally believed that that stopped the Muslims from completely taking over Europe. Just think about that, how the world would have changed. Western civilization would have ended right then and there. How about the Alamo, American history? Davy Crockett, James Bowie, William Travis, the 220 men that laid down their lives, John Bonham. They laid down their lives to give General Houston a few more days. Now, General Houston would have preferred that they left it and came join him, but not in their minds. In their minds, the freedom of Texas depended upon them to hold that Alamo. Gave up their lives. Let's look at Gettysburg. Many believe that when Lee invaded the North, there in Gettysburg, where the battle took place, that if Major Chamberlain, who later became governor of Maine, if Joshua Chamberlain did not do a textbook maneuver on the top of the hill, Little Round Top, he literally saved the entire Union. That man making that decision to charge bayonet down that hill. They believed that if the Confederates took that hill that day, they would have been able to bomb Bard, the Union. The battle would have turned differently. Who knows how history would have changed. Then you have Churchill, the Battle of Britain. All alone for a year. The Brits were alone for an entire year. We weren't in the war. France had already surrendered. Everybody else in Europe, in Eastern Europe, had already been taken by the Nazis. Churchill had the Brits fight for a year. For a year. What would have happened if they surrendered? Like his cabinet. His cabinet wanted terms. Also in World War II, how about the Battle of Bastogne in Belgium? The Battle of the Bulge. You know what? Patton took his men on the most incredible journey, 3 days, tanks and everything, to get there to relieve General McCulloch of the 101st Airborne, who, when asked to surrender by the Nazis, said, "Nuts." McCulloch, he was getting destroyed. Bombs falling, men dying. Surrender your position. And he said, "Nuts." And as a result of him saying nuts, Patton got there to relieve him. You see what I'm talking about here, folks? And you know what? This election very might well be just like those other historical examples. And you might say, why would they be like those other historical examples? I'll tell you why they'd be like those other historical examples is because what happens if Biden's election stands, somehow the Democrats grab the Senate, what happens to our country? Socialism, globalization. I mean, it's scary. We are at Armageddon and we battle for the Lord. Now, I told everybody to stay calm and trust me, this is going to end up in the United States Supreme Court. I mean, I had so many people over the weekend. Oh my God, I'm going to give up. People like you, Nick Batista. Well, let me tell you something. I'm right. And you know what? Clarence Thomas, he's probably sitting there thinking to himself, he'd like to get a little revenge on Joe Biden. Don't think for a minute that judges aren't political. They're appointed by the President of the United States. They're appointed by the President of the United States. They're political beings. Who swore in Amy Coney Barrett? Who swore in? It was Clarence Thomas. They get this to the Supreme Court. What else did I say? I said that the president gets to fight this from the power of the presidency. What does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. Attorney General Barr announced yesterday that the Justice Department is getting involved. What do you think about that? And you know what that gives? That gives the power, subpoena. It's not just the Trump campaign, it's the Justice Department. And the Justice Department has power, connections, relationships. Oh, and by the way, when the Democrats start screaming about this, remember Eric Holder bragging, he's Obama's wingman. His wingman. I'm telling you, folks, this case of this election, as I've said, from day one, will be determined by January 1st by the United States Supreme Court, and Trump will win. By the way, they're also saying, oh, you're not cooperating with this transition. Well, let me tell you about the transition. There's plenty of time. Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States. He's got people lined up. He doesn't need a big old transition time. Unlike Trump, who was a newbie to the swamp. That's a different ball game. It isn't the same ball game. Let me tell you something else about the Democrats getting all upset about this. I have something called the golden rule. We use it in the Durrani litigation. That if they like it, then it's bad for us. If they don't like it, it's good for us. Anything the Democrats are screaming and howling about, I guarantee you it's good for the Republicans. It's good for Trump. And you know what? That golden rule applies to this situation. I actually think, folks, that they're going to uncover massive fraud, Hammer scorecard, this whole issue with those. And there's evidence of that by these counties where these votes got switched. But I just want to tell you something. Nobody's talking about this. Donald Trump got 70 million votes. The enthusiasm was out the yin-yang. Folks, there was absolutely no enthusiasm at all for Biden. How do you explain him getting 72 million votes? How do you explain that? I think that this ballot harvesting, where they go into all these cities, poor precincts, and by the way, I still say there's more whistleblowers to come. Hell, they might even be paid some money to tell the truth. In other words, it might get down to say, hey, listen, we'll make it worth your while. Tell us what the hell happened here. And then you got the conspiracy with the coronavirus. But by the way, nobody's talking about this. That is going to help hold Georgia. Look what the Republicans get to do down in Georgia. The devil's down in Georgia, Charlie Daniels, pun intended. They get to go down to Georgia and say, look at all you Nimrods that voted for Biden because of the coronavirus. Look, you got a vaccine now. We told you it was coming and you didn't believe us. So look how the coronavirus issue has changed in Georgia. Don't you wish every state now could go back and say, hey, wait a minute. Trump would have, well, they would have still cheated. See, that's the problem. Coronavirus comes out, they would have still cheated. And again, folks, They had this lined up. They knew Pennsylvania was battleground. They knew they had the corruption in Philadelphia. Michigan, they knew they had the corruption out of Detroit. Nevada, they knew they had the corruption out of Vegas. I mean, come on. Clear as day. Atlanta. Folks, I want to tell you something, just so you know about Atlanta. Atlanta is a very, very liberal city. Very liberal city. Home of Stacey Abrams. Need I say more? The other thing is that we need to keep pounding. Who wanted early voting? Who wanted mail-in voting? And why? Why? It isn't about every vote counting. Who didn't want voter ID laws? Who didn't want the observing? They're cheating, folks. The Democrats. They know that this is a way they could cheat. And folks, I'm going to tie this into my show yesterday. Complete political gangsters. Complete political gangsters. And folks, what's at stake? What's at stake is the Republicans, the conservatives, the libertarians, the Trumpers, conceivably could never hold power again. And if they don't, Western civilization is over. Remember, Europe has already succumbed to socialism and the Muslims and that whole political correctness, diversity, and everything else. They want America to be the same way. Trump and you and me, we wanted to make America great again. So folks, we need to fight like warrior poets. We need to fight like Leonidas. We need to fight like Charles the Hammer and the Franks. We need to fight like McCullough and Patton. We need to fight like Bonham and Travis and Crockett and Bowie at the Alamo. We need to fight like Chamberlain and Union at the lines at Gettysburg. We need to fight. And you know what, folks? Biden and his boys always just expect the Republicans to be like Mitt Romney and John McCain. Well, we got George Bush. We got to be gentlemen here. You won the election, I'll give. Because they're wimps. You can't fight you know what drives Hillary Clinton and the rest of them insane? Absolutely insane. Trump's not like them. He fights back like you and I want him to fight back. Nobody would have beat Hillary Clinton but Trump. They would have the Supreme Court right now. Think about that. They just figured the media, and the media is the co-conspirators. The media, and now they're ready to lose their minds right now. Like, what? Wait, we called this race. What? How dare Trump and his people fight on? How dare? We've called this election. Really? The same people that have been kicking Trump and Trump supporters in the gonads for 4 years, calling us the deplorables? Ladies and gentlemen, the American Jury and Bulldog Nation, engage. Fight on. Spread on social media. Show up at rallies. Petition. Raise hell. Donate money. Do everything you can. Fight like Western civilization itself is at stake. Because I believe it is. This is the Bulldog. Every dog has their day. Go out and kick some ass today.